celebrating the hard work and determination of our area athletes. This is The Score on WQAD News 8.
Good evening and welcome to a special edition of The Score Sunday. Over the next half hour, we'll take a look back at the high school football season, name our team of the year, player of the year, and our game of the year. And joining us for our first segment, Greg Armstrong from the View from the West podcast, a very successful podcast, I might add.
Well, thank you.
Did you imagine when you started it how successful it was going to be?
I mean, I think we always kind of like hoped that there was a desire for people to hear more about small school football, right? And we always talk about like how on Friday nights we try to fit in as much as we could, but it was like there still was so much more to talk about. And you know, with the podcast form, you can kind of go as long as you want. So I think for us, it was just a matter of like just adding a little more content to what you guys do here and to what's in the newspaper, and it's just. Yeah, I'm glad it's going well. You hear from people who listen to it and enjoy it. That's a ton of fun to hear. We love it.
Well, we're going to start off with the Western Big Six. And of course, Jenna Miner is here. Funny thing about this, Jenna was here last year when we shot this show.
I remember that, actually.
She came for her interview that day.
Station visit,
so,
yeah.
That's
That's
station
great.
visit. That's
Wow, that is
and now
funny.
she's part of the show.
Full circle.
Full circle for her, yes.
That's great. Well,
So-
welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So we will start in the Western Big Six, and we're going to start with our team of the year. And Greg, I will defer to you as always. Who's your team of the year?
Now, it's not in our viewing area, but I think you have to mention Quincy in this conversation, right?
I agree.
The Quincy Blue Devils, for the second year in a row, have probably what would they consider the best season in their program's history, right? Back-to-back years, they've continued to, top themselves with Braden Little at quarterback and Jarius Rice, Tykel Hammers, the names that we were talking about every week playing against our Quad Cities teams. I think for me, that's the team of the year, but I know the Quad Cities area had great teams as well, so I'll let you guys go in on those, but I had to mention Quincy.
And rightfully so. They've won it 2
Yeah.
years in a row, like you said. So, Jenna, I'll ask you, team of the year.
Okay, I feel like I have to go with Moline. They had a great year, and they made it back to the playoffs after a 4-5 season. So I'm gonna go with them as my Western Big Six team of the year.
I will concur on that one. Second in the Big Six, it makes sense. They lost to Quincy twice. They lost to Lyle Bennett. They're 8-3 this year. First round win over Addison Trail in the playoffs. So right back where Mike Morrissey wants this team to be. So Moline would be my team of the year this year. So let's go to game of the year in the Western Big Six. And this one was a little bit tougher because you looked at, there weren't too many close games in the Big Six.
The game we talked about before we went on, I think you go Sterling and United Township. You have some of the details on that game, but that was a really, it was kind of one of those equally matched games, and Sterling kind of impressed us with that win.
Real quick, your game of the year?
I'm going to go with Moline UT. So Moline took the
there you
game
go.
28-14, but it was sort of, that tale of two halves. Moline 21-0 at halftime, but then UT had that dominant third quarter, scoring 14 points. So I'm going to go with that one just to mix it up a little bit, but that's going to be my game of the year.
That was a good game. I covered that game. That was a fun game. But back to that Sterling UT game, which is also my game of the year.
Yeah.
Going into that game, Nick Welch knew that they couldn't kick to Caden Phillips. They did it twice.
And what happened?
And guess what? He returned 2 touchdowns each time they kicked to him.
Yeah.
And that was the big difference in that game. And then UT could have tied it at the end of the game. They got a PAT block at the end of the game to make it a 1-point game. So that was my game of the year. It was a really fun game. So this is a tough one now. So we're going to go with player of the year.
Yes.
And there's a lot of people to pick from in this one. And I'll start with you again, Greg.
Yeah. Again, I will start with Quincy. I will say Braden Little's name because I think you have to in this conversation.
Yes.
He's outside of the Quad Cities viewing area, but I think he has to be brought up in this conversation. The other player that I saw firsthand a couple different times this season, Adrian Cooper, played really well in their game against Addison Trail in the playoffs.
Yes.
He really kind of came on late in the year, started playing really good football when Moline really needed him to. For me, that's kind of where my head goes.
I'm going to go with someone from United Township.
Yes.
I'm saying Isaiah Navarrette's going to be my
Good one.
player. So he had 897 rushing yards, averaged about 7 yards per carry. He had 10 rushing touchdowns, but he's also, a force with the passing game. He had 193 reception yards and 2 touchdowns that way. So he's going to be my Western Big Six player.
My player of the year is going to be Caden Phillips from Sterling. And he's a guy that was an impact player to me. He could beat you deep on a pass play. He had 747 receiving yards, 9 touchdowns, 2 punt returns for a touchdown against United Township. And then he had 952 all-purpose yards and 11 touchdowns. So he was a really good player and on a really good team, and they got back to the playoffs this year. So Caden Phillips is mine. And you can't go wrong with any. And correct me if I'm wrong, Braden Little, second in most categories across the state?
Second or third in, several different categories, passing yards, passing touchdowns, completions.
Yeah.
He really was continuing to climb up the record books. If they could have gotten one more win and played one extra game, it would have been really interesting to see where he ended up. But either way, a remarkable career for him. Yeah.
All right, we've got a lot to get to.
All right.
So, time for our first break. We're going to hop the river to check out on the big schools on the Iowa side. Tom Johnston from the Dispatch and Quad City Times will be joining us right after the break.
The Score continues on WQAD News 8.
Welcome back to this special edition of the Score Sunday as we look back at the high school football season. Joining us now, sports writer from the Dispatch and Quad City Times, Tom Johnston. We're going to talk a little Iowa big schools. And for you, covering the big schools this year, did you enjoy it? I saw you out at a few games this year.
Oh, of course. It was always good football. Well, not always good football, but it was entertaining.
Good atmospheres.
And there were always good atmospheres. It was wonderful having North Scott's new facility
Yes.
this year. That was a just tremendous job that the people up there did. High school football facilities around here are a notch above anyway.
Absolutely.
So that just added to the atmosphere and some of the good football that we got to see on Friday nights.
All right, so let's start it off, and we're going to start with your team of the year for the Iowa Big
geez.
Schools.
Iowa big schools. How big do we go? You got to go, if you have to go, you almost have to go North Scott.
3A, 4A, 5A. So, yeah.
Making it to the semifinals, back up to the Dome.
Sure.
Not the finish that the Lancers wanted by any stretch of the imagination, but by that time they were beat up and then got beat up even more by North Polk, eventual champ North Polk.
Right.
And but for the Lancers, just a fantastic season. Put up numbers, but it's hard to look past Bettendorf with starting out 8-0 in the regular season. PV once again starting out with a tough loss. First game of the year to Bettendorf, and then rebounding and getting on a roll. But I guess we got to narrow it down. I'm going to go North Scott.
And how about for you, Jenna?
I'm also going to go with North Scott. You can't, it's hard to, they made it to the state semifinals. And just for me, a big thing, again, was their postseason run. Obviously, that redemption win over Western Dubuque, and then the way they beat Decorah just to make it to the state semifinals. So, yeah, I got to go with North Scott.
We'll make it 3 for 3. That was my team of the year as well, and rightfully so. I mean, open a new stadium, and you have a great year, and why not, right?
Absolutely.
All right, moving on. Game of the year.
Wow.
This is tough. Yeah.
This one is tough.
Yeah.
You and I talked about this. We threw out some good ones. I'm probably going to step on your toes here.
know.
But I'm going to go back to that. I hated it being the first game of the year. But that Bettendorf PV rivalry, it's hard. It's hard to beat just with the rivalry and the intensity between those two schools. And then to have an overtime game decided right off the bat. And, kind of set the tone. It actually set the tone for both programs this year. So I'm going week 1, Bettendorf PV OT.
I'm going to jump in next because that was my game as well.
No!
And that's
then I
okay.
should have gone the other way.
No,
Gosh,
and that's
darn it.
okay because, again, they go into the overtime tied. PV scores first, Bettendorf scores, and Coach Wiley goes, we're going to go for 2 and go home.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
So they won the Hy-Vee Bowl for the second straight year, I think it was. So
yeah.
good for them. So do you have something different, Jenna?
I do have
Okay.
something different. I'm going
Thank
back
you,
with the
Jenna.
Lancers. I'm going to talk about their 4A quarterfinal game, North Scott and Decorah. Just the
Okay.
way it ended, I feel like I had to go with it. There's 29 seconds left. North Scott's down the whole game. Chase Smith to Kai Smith to win the game. that had to be my game of the year. It was just a thriller. Thriller at the end, yeah.
Absolutely it was. All right, so player of the year.
Impossible to
It
pick.
is.
You had 4 of the best quarterbacks in the state representing MAC schools this year.
Sure.
And I am not going to go out on that limb and separate one from the pack.
Okay.
We're going to go Kaz Grabarczyk from North.
Yep.
We're going to go Jackson Laver from Bettendorf, Harrison Fierce from PV, and the aforementioned Chase Smith from North Scott. Give them all a piece of the pie.
Perfect. How
Yeah,
about for
that
you?
was a good answer.
She'll
I'm
narrow
gonna-
it down.
I feel bad
Please,
doing
I hope so.
No.
Somebody be decisive on this set.
No, you're right. They all definitely deserve their accolades for the season. But yeah, I'm going to go with Harrison Fierce from PV. He had 33 touchdowns total on the season, 21 rushing, 12 passing, and he had over 1,200 rushing yards and nearly 900 passing yards. So just, a great year with Harrison.
And I'm going to go with Chase Smith. is who I'm going to pick. 2,300 yards passing, another 280 rushing, 31 total touchdowns. He even caught a touchdown in that Decorah game.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
that was pretty big for him. So
Led 4A in completions too.
yeah, so not a bad year for him and for any of those
You couldn't
players.
you couldn't go wrong with
You
any of
couldn't
them.
go wrong.
Absolutely.
All right. Time for a quick break, but when we come back, Greg Armstrong will be back with us as we look at the small schools in Illinois. That's up next in this special edition of the Score Sunday. Welcome back to this special edition of the Score Sunday. Greg Armstrong back with us as we take a look at the small schools in Illinois, and we'll jump right in. How about your team of the year? And this is tougher because there's a lot more schools to pick from.
Yeah, see, team of the year, I feel like I'm going to get myself in trouble with somebody because you got like Princeton, Monmouth, Roseville, and Rock Ridge, and they all played each other and they all split, right?
Right.
So where do you end up going there? My initial instinct is Monmouth, Roseville.
Okay.
Because they had that signature win
Yes.
over Princeton. I think that at the time really stood out to us. Now, down the road, Rock Ridge gets a win over Monmouth, Roseville. But I think in the moment, and we'll talk about that game in a second, that to me was a defining moment for that team to kind of get to that next level. I'm going to say Monmouth, Roseville.
I'm going to go opposite of you, and I'm going to take the team that lost in that game. I'm
Yep.
going to say Princeton,
Yep.
only because they finished with 10 wins. They got to the state quarterfinals. They went the furthest
That's
than
true.
any other small
Absolutely.
school
Yep.
in the area. So that's the only reason I'm going with them. I know they didn't win conference, but to me, they got further in the playoffs, so
Yep.
therefore they're my team of the year. How about for you?
Yeah, I'm also going to go with Princeton. Sorry.
You're all good.
I really want to focus in on that state quarterfinal game. I know they lost, but I was there covering it, and I feel like that Princeton defense, they had so many big stops that really, stopped the game from getting too far out of hand. Arthur Burton, he had an interception in the red zone, a deflected pass, and of course Noah Laporte, you have him, he had a fumble recovery. I just feel like just seeing how they performed and sort of stayed into that game.
All right, real quickly, how about your game of the year in small
Okay,
schools?
now my game of the year, I think I might go with Rock Ridge over Monmouth Roseville. For kind of some of
Okay.
the same reasons I said, I felt like in the moment, the Monmouth Roseville win over Princeton was huge, but then Rock Ridge was still trying to find a signature win, and they get it at Monmouth Roseville late in the season. To me, I'm going to go with that as the game of the year because it felt like Monmouth Roseville was riding a ton of momentum, and then Rock Ridge came in and grabbed that win.
I'm going 8-man football in this one. I'm saying the Ridgewood Amboy game. They got
Absolutely.
their revenge.
Yep,
They
absolutely.
lost to them in the championship last year, so getting that 34-22 victory over
That's a
them
good
was
call.
huge.
Yeah.
But a secondary one, again, we have to talk about Milledgeville. I'm saying the Milledgeville polo game that, they won to get them to the state championship.
Yep.
Honorable
Huge.
mention.
There you go. Yeah, that's two really good ones.
Yeah.
See, we got Milledgeville. We got 8-man football in here. No big deal. All right, player of the year. And again, when you're talking small schools, there are
tough.
so many good players.
Yeah, it's tough. I'll name a few. Cullen Schweigen. You have Carter Livingood from Milledgeville,
Yes.
a huge name this year. Nolan Orwig from Stark County had a great year, leading the Rebels to a great season. Those are a few of mine, but the name that really stood out to me this year was Alex Duarte. Led him to the playoffs, led Kewanee to the playoffs, and just was such a weapon on both sides of the ball. He was gonna hit you hard on offense, and he's gonna hit you hard on defense.
Yeah.
And it's just a player that I talked to many coaches around, and they said, you have to watch for him all the time, both sides of the football. I'm going Duarte.
I think that's where
Yeah,
you're
I'm
going too,
also
isn't it?
Did I steal your thunder?
No,
No,
it's
you're good.
okay.
I have some of his stats. So, yeah,
Okay.
he had almost 1,500 rushing yards and 21 rushing touchdowns, and he is the career touchdown leader at Kewanee with 37
That's awesome.
touchdowns.
Yep.
And he's second in career rushing yards with 2,587. So, yeah, I also had to go with Duarte.
Yep.
There's a lot of good stories with him, and
Yep.
we're
Oh,
going to
yeah.
get to that over the next couple months here as he's going to start the wrestling season up there. For me, I'm going to go with Sterling Newman and Daniel Kelly. I think I talked
Yeah.
about him in our preview show that we did, and I said, Mike LeMay said he is going to be an all-state linebacker. He's an all-state linebacker,
Yeah.
and here's why. He had 375 yards rushing. Yeah, whatever. 3 touchdowns. 237 yards receiving and a touchdown. Here's the big one on defense. 125 tackles on defense.
crazy.
15 tackles for loss, 4 interceptions, and 2 touchdowns out of those interceptions.
Yeah.
Pretty impressive for a young man playing at Sterling Newman. What's next for you as you get ready to do the View for the West here? I mean, I know you've got football coming up.
So we cover the state championship games. Mitch Stormer, my co-host, and I will be are in at Illinois State covering the 1A through Class 4A. So Lena Winslow from our coverage area in the Northwest Upstate Illini will be there. But then we're just excited to cover some good small school Illinois football on that Friday afternoon.
Excellent. If you haven't listened to it, View from the West podcast, get it from Podbean or wherever you get it.
Anywhere you find podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, absolutely.
I've listened to it a few times. I understand what you're saying.
I love it. All right.
All right, one more break. When we come back, we'll take a look at the small schools in Iowa and look back at some of the best moments from this year's football season. That's next on The Score Sunday. Welcome back to the special edition of The Score Sunday. Tom Johnston back with us as we look at the small schools in Iowa. And this one's a little bit easier, I think, for all of us, is when you look at the small schools in Iowa. And I'm going to just say it. Wilton.
Yeah.
I mean,
Wilton?
for Team of the
Wilton?
Year.
Yeah.
Does it make sense? I mean, you saw them up at state. It didn't turn out the way they wanted to, but they still played hard.
No, and you know, you get beat in the semifinals against the state champs.
Right.
You know, there is no shame in that. And, you know, kudos to Ryan Hetzler and what he's doing out there. Bunch of seniors this year. That's going to be the only downfall is I think they're graduating 16,
I think
17?
something like that, yeah.
Something like that, seniors from this team. You know, good juniors and sophomores coming up, but still, this was the year they were pointing toward. They accomplished what they wanted to accomplish, finishing the season up in the dome, and you can't ask for more than that.
And you got some other stuff.
Oh,
on
yeah.
there.
Well, just one thing I want to talk about, not necessarily the skill of the team, but just the heart of the team. Like, I got, the chance to talk with them after the state semifinal game, and just, I don't know, just the chemistry of the group and just how proud they were to get to the spot they did. Rightfully so. It was just amazing to see, and the community support. I know you were at state. You saw how many people showed up.
Everybody from Wilton.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah.
like the whole time
Yeah.
in Wilton. So that was
Yeah.
just awesome to see throughout the season when they were home and just at state. Just the support that they have too is just awesome.
Humble young men too.
Oh,
That's,
yeah,
I didn't get a
absolutely.
chance to interact with them much, but up at state, man, they were gracious
Oh,
in
yeah.
that defeat, and they knew they had accomplished something. They were proud of that, and they should have been.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Game of the year. I mean, it seems obvious to me.
It's got to go back to Wilton somewhere along the
Yes.
line. Probably beating Iowa City Regina. Beavers were in 2 one-score games this year, and I mean for them to handle their schedule the way they did, accomplish what they did, but then on top of it, finally getting over that hump in Iowa City and making it to the state semis.
Sure. Iowa City Regina as
Yeah,
well.
that was my game.
That was fun.
Wilton, they haven't beaten them since 1988, right?
Right.
Yeah, it was just a crazy win for them.
And to do it in like 30 seconds
Oh,
left in the
yeah.
game.
Yeah.
That was unbelievable for them. All right, so now for player of the year. Where do we go?
I'm
I'm going to defer. Miss Wilton over here is probably going to be all over this one.
I'm going to go with quarterback Drew Keith. He had almost 2,000 passing yards and 22 touchdowns. So great season for him. Obviously, like we said, great season for Wilton, but yeah, I'm going with Drew Keith.
And I'm going to go Gavin Kramer from Northeast.
Another good one, yeah.
Another really good one. Almost 1,100 yards passing, had a really good season. So really good year for him. They didn't get where they wanted, but still had a really good season. So, hey, thanks for coming by and helping us out.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Have a great Thanksgiving and good
So
holidays.
nice to have a new addition to
Yeah,
this.
know, right?
Thank you.
Yes,
She
indeed.
classes the place up.
She
a little.
does, quite a bit.
All right,
yes.
before we leave you tonight, we're going to take a look back at some of the best plays and moments from this past year. Enjoy.
It is going to be a fun freaking night, guys. All right? Let's get after it. Let's have some fun. Hey, let's do it again right now. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to high school football on WRMJ and WRMJ.com. let's get to the highlights.
Have some fun, fly around, start hitting people. Let's have some fun. Let's go. All we ask of you is everything you freaking got. Be a total effort guy, be accountable to your teammates, get after it, leave nothing left on the field.